28 participants. Some more people might join us, but let's get started. My name is Dotan. I am going to be the moderator for this evening's panel discussion. And before we meet our superb panelists, all my friends from high school, let's talk a little bit about how this is going to work. So my plan after we introduce ourselves is to look back at the WOVA app and to see what questions you have put either in the chat comments section or in the question and answer section. So if you want to take the next few minutes to put questions or comments into the WOVA app, we're going to be monitoring that throughout our discussion. And hopefully that is going to drive the way we talk about the big things that are coming up for you all very soon. So the more questions asked, the easier my job is. So please go ahead to the WOVA app and check that out. If there's any topic you want discussed and you don't necessarily have a question, you can put that in too. So I will start by introducing myself. Again, my name is Dotan. I am from Philadelphia, before that Israel. I went to the Philadelphia High School for Creative and Performing Arts. I now go to Temple. I study music education. It wasn't always that. I've shifted around a little bit. I'll talk about that later. But I am about to graduate. I'm finishing up my last month of classes. And then maybe I'll teach in a high school that you attend, which would be pretty cool. One thing I wish I knew was that these big things that are coming up are not final. When you pick a major for college, it seems sometimes that you are deciding the path for the rest of your life. And that's really not true. I have many friends who've changed majors. I'm one of them. I have friends who've switched schools. I have friends who've gotten a degree in one thing and then changed completely to something else. In a master's degree or another bachelor's degree. So as important as all of this is, just know that you can take a deep breath. You're making decisions that are big and important, and we're going to help you try to make the right decisions for you. But none of this is final, and none of this is going to determine the rest of your life. So if we want to talk about that more, we will get to that later. But for now, Naira, can you introduce yourself and we'll work our way through.
Hi, my name is Naira. I am a music education major at Rowan University. I went to the Creative and Performing Arts High School as well. I just graduated in June. And the one thing I wish I knew before college was like college expense, expenses like college auditions and like the fees that come with like doing your auditions, like either on campus or doing them virtually.
Thanks. Davey, can you go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Davey Heister. I am a third-year bassoon performance student at the University of Texas at Austin, as you could maybe tell by my flag right there. I graduated from Central High School in 2018, class of 277. Also a proud alumnus of many Project 440 programs. One thing I wish I knew 3 years ago when I was in the shoes of many folks watching this tonight is that when you get to college, if you're studying music performance and you're really serious about it, want to do it professionally, there is a big and kind of sudden increase in the standards that you will be held to and the standards that kind of exist in the spaces around you. For example, when you're a high school student, at least for me, a lot of the time I felt like it was all about getting a good spot in All City, doing PMAY, All State, all of that. And I was trying to be the best high school bassoonist and musician I could be. But when you get to college, it doesn't really go into being the best college bassoonist. You just want to like be the best. Like you're going to be sitting in ensembles with people who have had big performance jobs, but decided to go back to school for a doctorate. So yeah, the playing field just changes a ton, but just something to kind of take note of.
Claire, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Claire. I am a sophomore in music education at Temple University. I also went to the Philadelphia High School for the Creative and Performing Arts. Something that I wish I knew before, like, just in general, is that it's equally important to take care of your mental health and yourself as it is to learn that excerpt for that lesson that you have the next day or the same day. I find it that if you take a second to take a breath, drink some water, get a snack, just to take for yourself, that when you come back to something that you may have been struggling with, it will be a whole lot easier. I had that experience in practices, and I know that especially at this time right now, everybody's probably really trying to get their college auditions the best that they can be, but it's equally important to make sure that you are feeling the best that you can be as well.
Thank you. Last but not least, Marquise.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marquise Bradley. Like most of my friends here, or all of my friends here, I'm from Philadelphia, and I'm now a second-year clarinetist at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I'm also pursuing some minor coursework at Case Western Reserve University in organizational leadership through their School of Business. And one thing I wish I knew when I was in high school and maybe even freshman year of college is how just a general understanding and awareness of the learning process and my individualized learning style. To elaborate a little more, I think I can think back to my experiences in high school. You know, I was always competing with other people, and like Davey said, you know, there's the different regional band and orchestra auditions and all of the other things that we kind of use to mark our success. And usually I would set some standards that would align with that, in a sense that, you know, I'll be second chair this year, and then next year I have to be first chair. And if not, I didn't improve. Eventually you learn that that stuff doesn't matter. And also that's not the best marker of your improvement and your success, because that's just not how that learning process works, as it isn't this linear path that you go down and every day you get better. I'll elaborate a little bit more on that later.
Thanks, Marquise, and thank you to everybody. I just want to note before we go on, if there's something that one of us says that is specifically interesting to you, you can ask direct questions to one of us. Otherwise, we'll all kind of jump in, and everybody's got great things to say. However, if you are such a huge Cleveland Browns fan and you want to know about what it's like to live in Cleveland right now, you can ask specifically Marquise what he thinks about that. So I want to turn back to something that Claire was talking about for our first question. And this comes from London in the chat. London, the person, not the place, though maybe both, we don't know. The question is, have you ever thought that pursuing music wasn't worth it due to all the stress? And I'm gonna first answer for, I think, 98% of the music world and say, yes, music is hard. And if all you do is look on Facebook, you only get to see how easy everything is and when we all do great. But just know that every person who succeeded has struggled, even the greatest among us. And so this is always a doubt. It's okay to have those doubts. But what you do with those doubts is really what's going to propel you forward in whatever direction makes sense for you. Does somebody want to jump in here and give your 2 cents?
Sure. I will speak to that. And I will first reference a moment in my musical development, which I often think back to and has been really important to me, which was when I was a junior in high school. It was October of 11th grade. I went up to New York to visit a couple colleges, and I took a lesson with Billy Short, who is the principal bassoonist of the Metropolitan Opera, and one of the best, most heralded bassoonists in the world right now. And after my lesson, I thought I played pretty well for where I was at, but I asked him, so, hey, do you think I have a real shot at getting into the schools you teach at? And he was like, the only thing he said, first of all, I can't really answer that question right now because that's in a year and a half when you audition. But he said, what matters most is the work you put in between now and then. And then the moment which really got me is he said to me, I still feel the same way that you do today. And this is someone who's, gone to Curtis and Rice, two of the best schools in the country, and has tenure in the Metropolitan Opera, which is, a pretty remarkable achievement. So just understanding that the people who we look up to still face these inner battles, it's I don't know, it's kind of comforting in a way, knowing that everyone goes through this, and these struggles and thoughts don't go away. You just get stronger as time goes on. So, yeah.
Thanks. Claire, you put your hand up. You want to add in?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I love saying this joke because it just makes me laugh every time. Something that that goes around, at least in the music education major, is that music ed majors don't sleep. And it's funny because it's like, they say this because we're always at the max credits that we can take. So they say like we're always busy. And yeah, it's true. I'm always like doing, learning a new instrument or creating a lesson plan, but it's really when you do the like one of the assignments for class is we teach to our peers, and it's actually kind of like fun and rewarding, even though like it took a lot of time to sit there and write out every single thing on that lesson plan. Once you do it, it goes a lot quicker, and you end up having a little bit of fun with it, just because it's like I get to kind of like act like my friends are third graders, and it's just rewarding after a while. I don't think I regret doing music either. And yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Before we move on to our next question, I just want to mention that I am in my 4th year as a music education major, and I definitely have had semesters like that, and I've had semesters not like that. And man, this is hard, but it's within your control. And we'll talk more about that more as well. But we don't want to scare you. We want to encourage you. And speaking of encouragement, I'd like to take a collective exhale together while we answer this next question, which comes from Ken. What are 1 or 2 things that when looking back, we would say you wish you knew? Oh, excuse me. This is the one I wanted. You put 2 great questions, and we'll get to that one later. Ken asked, what is an example of something that when looking back on your high school days, you're worried about something, but now it's not really a problem? And man, do I have a long list. Anybody else on the panel want to jump in for this one? I'll get started while you think. So I might get in trouble for saying this, but your grades are very important. Every little single tiny grade in the grand scheme of thing is not worth stressing about. I was offered scholarship money because of my high GPA. And that was huge for me. Otherwise I would not have been able to go to school. However, and so that shows you how important this is. However, the difference between a 3.64 and a 3.65 is usually not going to make the difference. And if I remember correctly, leading up to college auditions and picking which schools I wanted to go to was very stressful. And anything that you can take off your plate, not in terms of getting it done, definitely get everything done. You still do need to graduate, and you want to graduate doing a great job. However, getting things off your plate of stress. This is one thing to tick off your list. Do a good job, but don't beat yourself up about it. You've got a lot of things that they're looking at. Grades are just one of them. And it can be really overwhelming to finish high school while you're starting college already in your senior year. So take it easy where you can. And I think grades are one of those things in your last year within moderation. Any other thoughts here?
Sure. I would say when I was in high school, I used to be very concerned that I wasn't improving fast enough. And of course I was practicing every day. I was putting in that time, but still I had such a lack of security in my overall technical abilities and just that faith that I could do it. Now, I've grown to be a bit more secure, and everything I've done is certain skills have begun to crystallize. But I think it's important to recognize that as long as you're putting that time in, it's going to be hard not to get good, especially if you're receiving some sort of conservatory training, or even if you're putting in that time and that pressure and those standards are around you. If everyone's around you and they're putting in that work and you're doing what you need to do, you shouldn't be concerned, because the one thing you do have control over is the amount of time that you put in and the amount of focus and your approach. So if you're doing everything you possibly can, you're trying your best, and you're trying your best doesn't mean every single day you're practicing for 6 hours. That's not what that means. But really that you're able to focus when you sit down and practice, and methodically approach all of your repertoire and your coursework associated with that repertoire, and educating yourself beyond just playing the notes on the page, or just practicing for the sake of doing it, but really having some security in that process and knowing that if I do this for a week, it will be better. I may not recognize it because it's hard to recognize it when you're in it, but when you listen back to yourself 2 months from now, there's going to be improvement. That's just how we work as people. It's hard to do something over and over again and not get better at it. Still be focused when you're practicing and set some very specific goals, but also have some faith and trust in that process of practicing and refinement.
I kind of want to, add on to Marquise. I kind of felt the same way, where I felt like I wasn't at the level I was supposed to be, or at least like I thought I had to be at by the time I was in school or going into college. But something I kind of had to remind myself is that I'm going to school. Like, I don't have to know exactly everything right now at this time as I'm entering, because the reason I'm going to school is to learn. So don't stress yourself out about not playing up to your own personal standards, because of course you're going to be harder on yourself. It's you. So my advice is that not to stress about not knowing everything, but not being 100% perfect, because you are going to school to learn, and you will.
I would, if I can, I would just add one little thing onto what Marquise said. And what Marquise said is, I agree with totally. And what I would add is that I would make an analogy to with musical growth to literal human growth. Like when you look in the mirror from age 10 to 17, there's going to be a big difference, but you don't see that every day. It just kind of happens. And then once you're, whatever height you're going to be at the end, you look back and you say like, wow, I was a lot shorter a couple of years ago, but time went on. You eat healthy foods and you grow. So same thing in music, kind of.
Can I follow up a little bit with that, Davey? If eating healthy food and exercising and going to school and being social are things that help us grow as people, what are the daily things that help us grow as musicians? And this is not only for Davey, but if you could start, that'd be great.
Sure. Most basic things: long tone, scales, arpeggios, intervals. What your teacher is telling you to do. Those etude books that seem worthless when you're 15, but you'll come to appreciate in a couple of years. Yeah, just being patient, always working on the fundamentals and seeing the bigger picture, remembering that we do music to express ourselves, and you know, it's art. It's more an art than a science. So yeah.
Go ahead, Naira.
I think for like me personally, it's like also like taking the time to like think about like yourself mentally before you go into a practice room or like after like leaving a practice room. It's like you kind of like think about like you didn't do so well in a lesson like very often, where like you just like it just like gets stuck in your head too hard, where like you just need to like stop thinking about music at a certain point so you can improve instead of like worrying about that one note that you missed. That's like something that I'm still learning, like to just take breaks when you need to instead of overworking yourself, because then you'll burn out eventually.
That leads me to another question. And this is coming from Amelia. Asks us if we wish we had more time to relax. Panelists, you can talk about the audition time period, or you can talk about being in music school now. My guess is yes. And I'm eager, if any of you find someone who does not feel like they need any more relaxing time, please send them my way, because I need to learn from them. But anybody have any thoughts on this?
I wouldn't go as far as to say I don't need more time to relax. But I will say that I wish I had more time. And because the reality is, if I had more free time of just nothing to do, I'd probably do something that would push me in a different way. And I'd be able to challenge myself, because that's what I enjoy. I think I'm a little bit of a weirdo, but I think many musicians are like that, in a sense where, you know, the way I started relieving stress this semester was by running a 5K every morning. You know, that's not the most ideal way to, especially in the very beginning. That's starting was the hardest part of pushing myself to get out of bed at 7:30 and get up and running at 7:30 in the morning, but getting out of bed at 7 after I had been practicing way too late in the night, because we have 24-hour practice rooms here, and doing it. But after that first week, a 5K felt like just my normal breakfast routine. And that gave me that opportunity to de-stress, but also to improve on something and focus on that. So being able to practice setting goals and practicing tracking my improvement, because that gave me more of that security that I was looking for on the clarinet in my own practice, because it gets really hard to keep track of progress. It gets really hard to get out of your own head. And I don't mean to sound caught up in my own ego when I say this, but at this point, I've reached a level at the clarinet where it is so hard to realize improvement, because I'm already pretty good at it. At this point, it's all refinement. It's the time I spend, you know, I don't want to get too technical, but you know, when you're playing those long tones, the standard is not, yay, the note came out. It's, I have to do that again because my tongue did that. When you're running or when you're learning a new skill, you get to practice being bad at something and then getting better and realizing that improvement. And that's something that I've grown to learn, grown to love. And if I had more free time, I would spend more time practicing being bad and getting better, so that when I do pick up my instrument, it's like, wow, I guess I am pretty good at this. Because when I played the saxophone last night, it did not sound like that. So that's kind of what I have to offer.
Everybody's gonna deal with college differently. It's a big change, no matter who you are, where you're coming from, where you're going. Especially now, there's a lot of unknowns with COVID-19, politics, racial reckoning. This isn't new. Things are changing in our country, and it's hard for some people. It's hard for all of us in different ways. And before we got into the session tonight, we were all talking about things that we do to de-stress, and Claire was talking about the importance of self-care. And self-care is not for the weak, just so you know. Self-care is for the aware. Self-care is for the strong and the successful. And it's going to look different to everybody. If there are more pressing questions about that, we'll come back. But I want to continue talking about time in school, moving from relaxing time to job time. One of the questions came in about whether or not we feel like we have time to get a job as a music major. And that came from Riley, who has a bassoon in their profile picture. That's awesome. Me and Davey are both bassoon players, Claire too. And so it's going to be different. As I said, most of these questions are going to be individual. But just so you know, the most jobs I've had at a time while I was in school has been 4. All part-time jobs. I'm not working 160 hours a week, but it is possible. The advice I have for you, as best you can, if you can get a job related to what you're studying. For instance, I teach a lot of private lessons, and that directly correlates to my music education degree. If you're getting a performance degree, that also directly correlates. Working, in main office of your music school as like a work-study student helps, just to know how things function and get to know professors. Working as a stagehand or running lights for the stage at your school, that's all helpful, and it's kind of like feeding 2 birds with 1 scone, if you will. So you're making money and supporting yourself, which is awesome and needed for a lot of us. But you also are gaining skills, and you're learning, and you're working on your craft. Not to say that working in food service or retail or real estate or any other sector is not also possible. I have friends who do that too, but you do have to budget your time. Whether you're a music education degree student with, like, as Claire mentioned, a very rigorous schedule, 18 credits a semester usually, which is the max, at least at our school, and lots of different things to do. Or if you're a performance major and you really need to get those hours in on your instrument, it's going to be difficult to budget time. But if you prioritize getting a job, it is possible. Any more thoughts on this, folks? Go ahead, Naira.
I also would recommend trying to find jobs in the music department, especially with COVID now. I found a job in the music department, doing practice logs, because with Rowan at least, we have to have these sheets that tells you what time a person has been in there, and the practice room has to be aired out and stuff. So there's a lot of more job opportunities now because of COVID for students to have to be a part of the music department and still not be too far away from a practice room if you need to be in a practice room at the time. So try to find a job in the music department as much as you can, or at least in the building.
I would add something to this in terms of jobs in college. I would add 2 things actually. Something that I know a lot of people in the music school in particular do is look for a job something sitting at the front of the library where you just scan people's cards or something, because a lot of people, if you have a 4-hour shift at a weird time of day, there's not going to be a lot of traffic, so you can sit down and do homework or study or something. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing, which I think the Project 440 folks would like to hear, is think entrepreneurially. Yeah, whatever the adjective of that is. For example, if you're a bassoonist, like the person who asked this question, I know a lot of college bassoonists who sell reeds. So they start up their own little business or something like that, especially with bassoon reeds. Not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but if you can process your own cane, you can, you know, turn something that starts off being worth a quarter into something that's worth 20 bucks. It takes a lot of time, but you can do it. So yeah.
I have one more thing to add, and similar to Dotan, I currently have 4 jobs. I have 4 different streams of income coming in at various times, just depending on the amount I'm doing for different work, and especially now that virtual work is an option. So I do a lot of virtual work for Project 440. I do virtual work for departments in my school and things like that. You can find ways to maneuver around your schedule. And then that takes us to the time management aspect. I think as musicians, many of us have impeccable time management skills because we begin practicing that at such a young age as practicing musicians and inspiring professionals in high school. I think it then becomes a more nuanced intellectual kind of barrier to overcome, which is understanding your value management. And this is something that I've had to really take time to grasp in my personal life, because I reached a point where I was spending a great deal of time working and practicing and doing homework and serving on boards at school and things like that. But it got to the point where I was at maximum capacity. And when I had to do more because, you know, things don't always go as planned, I would hit this wall of productivity or unproductivity. And I think I had to reassess not necessarily how I spent my time and how much time I spent doing things, but how much time I spent doing things that didn't mean as much to me and for my future success. So for example, I'm a work study student here in our admissions office here at CIM. And at a certain point this semester, I realized that I was spending more time doing my work study job 2 days, specifically on like Mondays and Wednesdays. I spent more time doing admissions work study work than I did practicing and studying scores for chamber. I was still practicing the clarinet as much as I wanted to, but I felt unprepared in the rehearsals that I was in. And I made a lot of mistakes that could have been prevented if I just took a look at the score for an hour or 30 minutes or 15 minutes. And so I had to reassess some things and go, well, I have the time. I have the time to do everything I want to do. But am I spending time on things that aren't necessarily as valuable to me for my future success or even right now? So am I spending too much time, you know, score studying when I need to be spending more time doing music theory homework? Because the reality is I like score studying. It's kind of therapeutic, but also I like passing music theory. So once again, it's not necessarily, I think, especially when you get to a school where you have that time in your schedule to take that deep dive in all of your coursework and your private studies and your personal explorations, it then becomes a matter of assessing, yes, how much time you have to do all of the things you have to do, and then where you want to start really pushing yourself in certain areas, and also taking into account how much brain power it's going to take. Because my admissions work study job really doesn't take that much brain power, but sitting down and practicing does, and doing my music theory homework does. Even if it takes 30 minutes less than my work shift, I'm going to be much more mentally drained by the end of doing my music theory homework in comparison to the amount of kind of energy I'll have after I just completed my eurythmics assignment.
Yeah, so Marquise, I want to echo one thing you said in there, which I totally agree with. You have the time. Everybody out there who's done incredible things, they have the same amount of time as us, as hard as it is to believe. So it's all individualistic. It's about priorities, and it's fluid. So this is going to change for you, and it's going to be different than other people, and that's great. None of us have figured it out, but I agree that you probably have a head start because of the things you do with your time already. Speaking of head start, there's been a lot of questions about auditions, and I'm going to loop them all into one big discussion here. What are we expected to come to our auditions with? What are colleges looking for when we apply? What are we expected to know once we get there? The first thing I'll say is that this is different for different schools. There are some schools that are really highly competitive, and anything specifically that they can get you on, they're going to get you on. So there's some schools where you might just have to be perfect at everything. That's not most of them. There's a lot of schools that are not looking for the best players. They're looking for the most teachable students. And keep that in mind. You are going there to learn. You're not going there to do a service. If you're auditioning for the Philadelphia Orchestra, they want the best bassoon player. They don't want the person with the most potential to be a good bassoon player in the next few years. But if you want to go to Curtis, which is one of the best music schools in the world, they are looking for someone who's going to be the best in a few years. And so, of course, you want to have a good audition. Of course, you want to have good grades. There have been questions about being a well-rounded musician, theory, counterpoint, and music history, and knowledge of other things that are not strictly how you play your instrument. And so before I keep yapping, anybody have specific experiences that they want to share here about, Marquise, I know you work in the admissions office, but yeah, the schools are different. And so I want to hear kind of a rapid fire round. What do we think the schools are looking for? And does it make a difference if you have an amazing audition, but your theory skills are lacking? Or you, for instance, somebody asked a question, you play lots of different instruments and you're familiar with sound engineering and things like that, but your classical training might not be as high. Any thoughts on this?
It's kind of like what you said, that you're going to school to learn. So in my experience, I'm not the best music theory student, but as you take the classes, you begin to learn more and more. And I think that's something that is important. And I wanted to reiterate that you are going there to learn. So even if you don't have the experience before entering, you definitely will by the time that you leave.
I'd like to add a specific note about conservatories. So different from universities, conservatories only care about your playing. There is no essay that you can write. There is no standardized test that you can completely ace that will get you into a conservatory. Only your audition in comparison to everyone else's. If that's something, if you want your 1,600 on the SAT to get you scholarship money, then maybe the New England Conservatory shouldn't be your top choice. But that's not an issue, but these are things that we have to be aware of. And I think it's important to understand that. So when you go into audition situations, or as you continue to submit your applications in the next few weeks, or 19 days, that you keep those things in mind, and that certain schools you go to, they're going to love that you also play the saxophone and that you have an interest in doing all of these different things. But if you're looking for if you're looking for a conservatory specifically, sure, it's great, but your private teacher really doesn't care how smart you are. It's how are you as a performer, as a player, and how you get along together. And so I think it's important that everyone does their research about the school so that you know that your values are aligned with what the school has to offer, because that's really what it's about. What do you have? What do you want to learn? And how can this institution help you get there? How can that private teacher help you realize your full potential? And so I hate to kind of turn the question to the individual, but really, I think all of the schools, be that large universities, small universities, conservatories within universities, they're all very clear in what they're listening for, what they're looking for, and what the standard is at that institution. I think it's more important that you make that that personal assessment of your goals and realize how you fit into the given structure.
Thanks, Marquise. There's a lot of nuggets in here that are really good to keep. And I think that looking for what schools, like paying attention to what schools are looking for in you, helps you understand what kind of program it's going to be. And so it's really important not only to look at the audition requirements, but what is the program going to be? You can usually find a list of classes that you need to take to graduate with this degree from this school. And it's going to be different school to school, certainly in conservatories, but even more so in universities. Temple, for instance, has a pretty robust general education curriculum that everybody has to take. And so they also are looking at other things. And speaking of picking schools, we have a question from Jade here, and a few other people asked similar questions about flexibility of programming. So Jade specifically is asking about studying something else while you're studying music. Is that possible in certain schools? Is that something you have to look for specifically? The first thing I'll say here is that universities generally are easier with this kind of thing. And the second thing I'll say is that Marquise goes to a conservatory and he's doing just that. And so it is school specific. Generally, if you want to study music education and music performance, that's pretty easy because there's a lot of people who've done that before you. If you want to study bagpipe performance and microbiology, you should give your admissions program, admissions office a call and talk about how that might work. There are some programs where it works, but you have to add an extra year, or it works, but you're gonna have to pay more money, or it works, but your classes are gonna intersect sometimes, so you might be behind here and ahead here. And getting the details of what that's actually gonna be like is very important. And I'll tell you, the biggest reason why I chose Temple was because of the flexibility. I came in as a double major in jazz performance and music education, taking private lessons in classical bassoon, which is broad. And I knew that I was interested in lots of things, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to focus in on yet. And Temple had that flexibility, and I talked to administrators about that. And there were other students I could talk to about that as well, specifically. If you can reach out to students who are in these programs, they'll be the most honest about what they learn. Definitely more than the admissions people. No offense, Marquise. But if you can talk about this, folks, I know Marquise has experiences with learning multiple disciplines in one, whether it's within music or something outside of music, say organizational leadership. Please chime in here.
Yeah, so CIM actually is very unique in comparison to the other conservatories in that we have a strictly business relationship with Case Western Reserve University. So for those who aren't too familiar, it's a research level 1 university similar to Carnegie Mellon, which is a similar institution in Pennsylvania. And they are essentially training the next generation of engineers, lawyers, doctors, organizational leaders, and all of the people who are going to save the world. I go to CIM, but it's, I think, very convenient in a way that they're right across the street and they literally buy classes from Case and we take them. In that same vein, Case Western students can take some private lessons, music theory classes, and a few other things that we offer here. And that's something that I researched, just by going on the school's website and realizing that that's drastically different from Peabody, for example. You could go to Peabody and still study at Johns Hopkins. It would be much more difficult. Their institutions they're linked, but the programs are so separate. And you're on different sides of the campus and all these different things. So it's important to, one, understand how it's presented on paper, but also try to get to speak with some students who are doing some more diverse coursework throughout their time in the institution, because that's where it really you start to realize the impacts that different overlapping degree situations or coursework kind of have on your daily schedule. But I was very fortunate at CIM to have the option to pursue more academics through another university. And that has been extremely beneficial for me. And at any point I could drop it. I'd still have to take other general education courses at Case Western, but that was the option that was presented to me. But I would also like to note that you know, it's not always about getting the degree. You don't have to be a double major to learn accounting. Most people, if you read, and I believe I learned, you know, at a Project 440 workshop a bunch of years ago, I think it was Seth Green who said, you know, if you read 2 well-written books on any given topic, you'll already be more educated on that topic than 98% of the population. If you take a business course for 6 months, you'd probably be pretty good. Sure, you may not get that dream job, but if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, then you'll be able to enter any given room with professionals and hold your ground. So I think it's a matter of really assessing not just the benefit of getting an extra degree, but realizing that there is no limit to what you can learn. And if there is, it's definitely not set by the school you attend.
Thank you. I want to add onto this conversation that it's easier to do things that other people have done before you. That does not mean you shouldn't do it because because no one else has done it. Oh my gosh, like break the glass ceiling, like blaze your own trail, like absolutely go for it. However, anything like if there's a program that advertises dual degrees, you know that they have an office that's working on that. And you know that it's going to be easier as opposed to coming in being a special case and trying to make it work. It's usually possible if you can advocate for yourself, and getting faculty to advocate for you is always helpful in the eyes of administration. But just keep that in mind if you know that's what you want, make sure you talk to people before you commit to that. We've only got 2 minutes left, so I just want to address a few things. We have a lot of questions about things like performance anxiety, things like you know, nervousness about which schools to pick, people telling you you're not good enough. So I just have a few words to say. You can decide if they're words of wisdom or not. You're not alone. I promise you, whoever's first chair right now, they're thinking the same thing as you, whether you're second chair or eighth chair or you haven't made it into the ensemble. As Davey was talking about, Billy Short is probably one of the best musicians alive. And he thinks the same things. This doesn't go away, but talking about it helps deal with the difficulties of what we do. And so please keep going. Don't let somebody shut you down. Forget the haters. Take everything that people say with a grain of salt. If there are any questions that we did not answer, please put them in the Q&A section, and we will go back and make sure every question is answered. We can also go into the comments, but things get lost in there. So if you can go into the Q&A section after this, add any more questions that you did not get answered, or reiterate a question just to make sure, and we can continue this conversation afterwards. Are there any final 10-second words of wisdom from our panelists here in our last minute? Go ahead, Davey.
I'll just add one thing. I saw a thing in the chat from Micah about UT specifically. I don't think we have time right now to discuss, but if you want to find me on like Facebook or something, my name's right there, or Instagram or whatever, absolutely feel free to message me, and yeah, I'll tell you all about what I think of UT. So
yeah, we're all around. You can find us on social media or communicate with us through the app, and we can reach out. Thank you all so much for participating. Your questions are all good. Juniors, keep doing what you're doing. Ask questions. Seniors, it's going to be fine. You're going to make it. We look forward to checking in once you have all succeeded, because there's no doubt in our minds that you're going to do that. So thank you all for coming to this session, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the college fair. Thanks.